You're listening to the Station 71 podcast with your hosts, Mario,
Beth,
and Brian.
So, this week we are going to dive into a fun topic about Disney myths and some things that people kind of spread around the parks that everyone thinks that they know, but maybe aren't actually true. But as always, let's first dive into the news. This week we actually have a bunch of stuff going on, it looks like. First up was that a teaser was released for Mary Poppins Returns and Christopher Robin. Did either of you see that?
I did not.
Yep, I watched.
How did you feel about it, Brian?
I mean, obviously they're both teasers, so it's kind of hard to see what you're getting out of them. I'm definitely excited for Mary Poppins Returns. I don't know how I feel about Christopher Robin yet. The teaser for it was very, very interesting because I felt like for Mary Poppins Returns, it felt very similar to, to the original Mary Poppins from what I saw, at least in the setting and that kind of stuff. Christopher Robin, if you've seen it, it's like grown-up Christopher Robin in the city, and Pooh kind of comes out of nowhere. So I'm very curious to see what they do with it. It's definitely gonna be different than your classic animated Pooh movies, it looks like. So I don't know.
I haven't seen either of them, so I don't really know how I feel about the teasers, but I'm interested in both of them. I've heard a lot of positive things about Christopher Robin's teaser, and it's weird to say positive things, even though it was probably like a couple minutes long from what I saw, if that. But I'm excited. As you guys know, I haven't really been like the biggest fan of the live action remakes that they're doing, but the fact that these are going to be not retellings of a story we already know is what's got me so excited, I think.
Right.
So after that, we had Skyliner Gondola Construction update popping up around Pop Century. So basically, the gist of this news story was that we saw some of the towers going up for the track system for the gondolas, and some minor construction at like Caribbean Beach and Hollywood Studios where we believe the actual stations are going. But the fact that the towers are going up is a good sign. It means that the construction's going up on the Skyliner transportation system, which is always cool to see some new stuff going on there.
Yeah, I still don't know how I feel about the gondolas.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same camp. Like, I don't know how I feel. I'm gonna take it once, but I feel like I'm probably gonna be like one and done with it.
It's like I don't think it's the worst idea. I just worry that it's gonna, I don't know, break the illusion if you're walking around the park and you see a little gondola floating above you.
Well, that was another thing. When I looked at this article about this, the towers look kind of gaudy in my opinion. Like, I don't know if they're gonna spruce those up a little bit or do anything to make them look a little bit nicer, but I'm hoping they do something with it.
I mean, it can't be any worse than like the monorail tracks, and we're all pretty accepting of those.
I think the monorail has, maybe it's just nostalgia too, but at least the monorail, it's, I don't know how to say it, it's futuristic, and maybe they've just been around so much that you just associate them with Disney World, but I don't mind the monorail tracks that much. Something about these gondola towers just, they don't look good.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, they do kind of look like telephone poles, but I don't know. I feel like we'll see when they go up how they tie in and how they look and how much they break the illusion, but I'm interested to see what's going on with.
Yeah, my main thing isn't the gondolas themselves, it's the fact that they're gonna have like all the Disney characters painted on them or decals on them or whatever, and I just feel like being in, like I don't know. I guess since there's already Mickey stuff in Hollywood Studios or whatever, but it's not going to matter that much. I don't know. It just, like, kind of like Brian was saying, I just think the idea of it is a little gaudy in general, but hopefully it'll change my mind.
Hopefully. And after that, we had Epcot's Odyssey to become Flex Space. It's not really super new, but for those of you that have seen what this building is, it's almost never used, but supposedly it's going to become like the new center for like food and wine and stuff like that. It's used on occasion for private events, but apparently it's going under a refurb to make it more accessible for these kind of things. And I wanted to touch base on this because we talked last week about how Wonders of Life was getting the refurb. And I feel like this is a sign that that's where all the stuff that was in Wonders of Life is now going.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's all I had to say about it. It's nice that it's getting love because I feel like I have never seen that thing open.
Yeah, I've only been inside of it a handful of times, and it's always to, like, if there's some festival food or drink item that, you know, catches my eye.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever actually, like, even looked in them. Did you want to cover these next ones, Beths? Because you had 4 in here that I don't think I've read anything on.
Yeah, I can. 3 of them are related to Club 33. The most recent one, I believe, is going to be the fact that construction has gone vertical in Adventureland, where there's rumored to be the Club 33 location. So that one hasn't been confirmed yet, but I have a feeling that it's just a matter of time. The other 2 are all but confirmed. They have installed doorbells at the old Catwalk Bar at Hollywood Studios and the American Adventure at Epcot. And the one, specifically the one at Epcot, has a design similar to the like Disney World logo that they released for Club 33. So that one is pretty like confirmed, but lots of Club 33 news and rumors floating around. And then this one I thought was kind of exciting, is that there has been new development planned that is rumored to be a hotel for the River Country area. So it's good to see that they're definitely doing something with it. That's just the rumor that it's going to be something like a hotel. But I'm glad that they're actually trying to develop some of that land again and make it usable.
Yeah, I'm curious about that because I think it would be a very cool spot for a hotel.
Yeah, I just want to see them use the land again. It sucks that it's just been sitting for so long. And it's kind of become that thing that, like, they probably should do something with it just because, you know, like we talked about in the one video, or not video, the one podcast, it's become that area that people just try to go to for, like, urban exploration. And while that's cool, it's probably more of a sore spot for Disney than it is for everyone else.
Yeah, hopefully whatever they do will at least, I'm sure it will pay some sort of little tribute to River Country.
Now the big question is, when do they do something with Discovery Island?
Right?
I feel like that's a little easier to hide than this is, though.
Much easier.
Yeah, I wonder if we'll ever see anything come of that. I don't think, it doesn't seem like it.
It would require so much work now to get it back, just to even to a natural state. So I'd be very surprised if they do something with it. It would be very cool if they did, but I don't see it happening.
Right.
So are we ready to dive into our myths this week?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
All right. So this week we kind of wanted to do this whole myths topic and talk about some stuff that like gets spread around on the internet that is totally not true, or maybe far off true. But I'm pretty excited to talk about this. What about you guys?
Yeah, some of these are the myths that you hear about, and they have that little bit of plausibility in them, and it just makes you go, oh wow, what if that is? And then some of these are just the ones that you hear from people all the time, and it just makes you want to facepalm and be like, how does this continue to be a thing that people believe after all these years?
So before we jump into this, because I sent this link to you, Brian, and in the group chat, Beth, I don't know if you took a look at it. There's some out there that are insane, and we're not going to cover all of them. I want to put that BuzzFeed article in there because some of those were just too funny.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to cover the ones that at least could be possible for the most part. I know there's some in here that, like, I guess don't seem possible to us, but that's because we're Disney fans and we know these things, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But just for some kind of reference point, a lot of these, at least I've heard said in the park, or when people are talking about the parks on like Facebook and stuff like that. So do we just want to go down the list? I think that's probably the easiest thing to do.
That
Sure.
works.
Sure. So that means that Brian gets to start us off.
All right. So one myth that I have heard, and it's interesting to me because it's from my favorite ride and it also directly involves Walt Disney, is the myth that in the graveyard scene of the Haunted Mansion, that the broken bust that's singing Grim Grinning Ghost is actually Walt Disney himself. So this is not true. Actually, the voice actor who plays this role is Thurles Ravencroft, who is famous for multiple smaller voice acting roles around the Disney parks. He was also in the Tiki Room. He's Fritz, one of the hosts, but he's probably most famous as the original voice of Tony the Tiger. So just knowing that, it's obvious that it's not Walt, and since they actually have a voice actor who this is credited to, but further driving home that this is false. The development of the Haunted Mansion was still in its very early stages during Walt's death, so for them to have a voice recording for him doing this would be very unlikely in and of itself, and just the fact that we know that it's someone else should put this myth to rest.
I actually surprisingly did not hear that one. And I feel like after you put it in here, I looked it up and I was like, okay, this seems like it's pretty popular.
Well, and I mean, if you look at the broken bust and, Thurles Ravencroft's face on it, he does bear a resemblance to Walt Disney, especially with the mustache, and the projection onto the bust does somewhat distort the face, so it's kind of hard to tell. So I mean, it's understandable how this myth got started, but obviously now we know that it's not the case.
Yeah, this is actually something that they share with you on Keys to the Kingdom, so
Oh, very cool.
I happen to know that already. But some of these I was reading down the list, and not only some of them I did not know or think about in general, but there are also ones that I was like, no, that's true. I've totally heard that forever. But anyway.
All right, so I guess the next one is also mine. This is the myth that the turkey legs in the Disney theme parks are not actually turkey and they are made from emu. So I guess a lot of it's hard. I was trying to trace back the source of this, and I never found where the actual first mentioning of this was. But for anyone that's had a turkey leg or seen one at the Disney parks, they are very large, a lot bigger than most people are used to seeing, say, at Thanksgiving dinner or so. The reasoning behind this, from what I've seen, is that mainly the turkeys that you buy in the store or when you get with like an entire turkey with turkey dinners, those are almost always female turkeys, which have much smaller legs than the males. Disney apparently buys almost exclusively male turkey legs to sell in the parks, and they are much bigger. But because they're so much bigger than what most people are seeing, I guess this has kind of led to this this myth that came up that somebody said, well, no, that's big, it must be an emu or an ostrich or something, and it kind of stuck. And I know some things that haven't helped, keep this myth from spreading. One is that I think it was just last year on Conan O'Brien, he had a guest that used to work at Disneyland who said something about the legs being made of emu. But multiple Disney representatives have come out and said that this is false. It would also violate a law about mislabeling meat that's sold for consumption. So for all intents and purposes, it looks like this myth is nothing but a myth.
This one is one that I actually had heard, and it still wows me that people think that they would even do that.
Mm-hmm. Another thing, and this a slightly off topic, but have any of y'all seen the movie Escape from Tomorrow?
Mm-mm.
I keep meaning to watch it.
Same.
And I've heard some weird things about it, but when it actually came out and people were like, oh no, it's awful, I kind of put it on the back burner.
I watched it, and it was kind of just a curiosity thing as a Disney fan. It perpetuates a lot of these myths in there. For anybody that doesn't know, Escape from Tomorrow was somewhere between a home movie and a actual, production quality movie that was filmed completely in the Disney parks without Disney knowing about it. And it's a bit ridiculous. It's hard for me to even remember most of the plot, but I do remember it perpetuating a lot of these myths. One of them being the turkey legs being emus, and that's what made me think about this. But it's an interesting movie. I wouldn't necessarily suggest it or say don't go watch it. If you're a Disney fan, it's kind of funny just to kind of watch and laugh at, but it's definitely strange.
I think like half the draw and half the reason people were watching it was because of how like weird it was that they got away with filming that movie without Disney noticing.
Yeah. And I just happened to look this up. It's somewhat hilarious. The budget on this is far higher than I thought it was. It's apparently $650,000.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah, to a box office pool of $171,000. So,
ouch.
Yeah, didn't do too hot.
Yeah. I bet one of the reasons that they got away with it is because this is kind of like the first time I think that people had really heard of the idea of like, hey, like this is like an actual, like people trying to make an actual movie inside the Disney parks. And I feel like after this came out, a lot of people tried, and Disney got savvy and was like, no. So I don't know, I could be totally wrong, but I feel like they kind of pioneered the idea, and maybe that's how they got away with it. But nevertheless, I need to watch it.
Yeah.
I think that's something that I'll probably do this week. I'll put that on my list of things to do.
I can't believe it released in theaters.
I know. I'm very curious to see how many theaters, though.
It probably wasn't much because it was like a small budget indie film.
Mm-hmm.
So this next one, I want to talk about this one to just reel it all back in for a second, because this is one that I feel like everyone's heard.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give it to Brian since this was his and he got to put this one in. But when we started talking about this topic, this was the first one that came to mind for me.
All right. Yep. This is the myth that the spires and some of the other higher parts of Cinderella Castle are actually able to be dismantled and stored away in case of a hurricane or any other inclement weather.
Yeah, I feel like this one gets perpetuated every time there's a hurricane in Florida. It's like people posting fake tweets and stuff.
And last year with Irma coming through, once Disney closed down, there was a news article that got posted showing one of the cranes above the castle and, furthering this myth. And it turns out that was actually just a picture from earlier in the year when they were taking down the Christmas lights off the castle. So it's one of those things that, like Mario said, a lot of people hear about this and believe it. And I mean, it's not, I guess, that ridiculous to think. But at the same time, if you have a building that's strong enough to withstand, the type of weather that Central Florida sees, it's probably not going to be easy to dismantle.
Right. And plus, I'm sure Disney isn't known for being overly concerned about their employees' well-being, but I find it highly unlikely that even if it were possible, that they wouldn't be making cast members go out and take pieces of the castle down in a hurricane. That would just be bad press all the way around.
Yeah.
So, do you want me to read the next part?
I mean, you can, but this is the funny thing about this is I have to go back a minute because Brian was talking about that picture of the crane. It's so weird that people think that just because there's a crane in a picture of the castle, that means that they're removing like part of the castle. Because how many times out of the year is there a crane behind the castle?
The crane's there all the time.
Always.
Like, that's the funny part is that people that aren't there all the time don't realize that. But yeah, from like when? Right after October until the 1st of January, the crane's there.
There was, I can't remember if it was a Twitter or an Instagram account for the castle crane. Like, it's there that much.
Yeah.
It's a park icon.
And there's also a Twitter for the people mover cone.
I've seen that.
But you can read the next part now that I got that little vent out.
Oh, sure. So anyway, I was just going to mention that obviously the way that we've been talking about it, that this whole Cinderella Castle being dismantled is a total myth. So the castle is made of over 600 tons of steel embedded in concrete walls, turrets, and spires. And the castle is actually, it was made to withstand hurricane winds of at least 90 miles per hour. So they don't need to take anything off this castle for it to survive a hurricane, as has been seen for almost 50 years now. So,
but yet the myth continues.
But yet the myth continues.
It's gonna show up every time there's a hurricane. I swear. I see that same Facebook post with the, like Brian said, with the crane in the background, and it's like Disney removing castle spires due to hurricane. It's like, no.
Yeah.
Please stop.
Crazy. So, our next myth, I'm sure many people listening have probably heard the quote, "If you can dream it, you can do it." And I myself have seen this on tons of, like, not Disney branded merchandise, but, Etsy people and stuff that you would see in, like, I don't know, a gift store, bookstore that's not at Disney, as a quote by Walt Disney himself. But the reality of this is that it was part of the script for Horizons, which was an attraction that is very well beloved. I never got to experience it myself, but it's kind of seen as the spiritual successor to Carousel of Progress. And the script was written by Imagineer Tom Fitzgerald, so while Walt Disney may have been the kind of guy that would say something like that, he wasn't actually the one that penned the quote.
It's actually in the song in Horizons 2. I linked that in the show notes. I don't know if you got a chance to listen to it.
Oh, no.
But it's, when you listen to it, you're like, wait, that's the actual quote. And it's like the opening line in the song, too. Or it's similar.
Yeah.
I want to say that the line is, "If we can dream it, then we can do it." But same thing.
So fact check, people. Before you go making your Etsy stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, it's still a Disney World quote.
Oh, sure. Yeah, if they, like, I have no problem with people putting it on stuff. It just, when it says, if you can dream it, you can do it, and then it's like, Walt Disney. I think it's a little disingenuous, but not purposefully.
Yeah. Right. So you want to go on to the next one?
This is a fun one.
This
is a really fun one.
I was about to say, this is in my opinion the myth about Disney World that like everybody like every layperson has heard this before, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's that Walt Disney was cryogenically frozen after his death in 1966. And furthermore, some of the even more ridiculous ones are that not only is he cryogenically frozen, but that his body is stored in various places in the Disney theme parks. Probably the most popular one is beneath Pirates of the Caribbean in Disneyland. This is another one that I don't understand how after all these years this is still a thing. Confirmations from family members and friends and even Walt's death certificate state that he was cremated. I think one of the biggest things that kind of spurred on this, or at least like gave fuel to the myth, was that his funeral was not open to the public, so very few people were there. And I guess that's kind of a reason people thought this. I don't know how you make that jump from he had a private funeral to he was cryogenically frozen and wanted to be brought back to life later. But I guess past that, there were two biographies about Walt Disney that made reference to this. Both of these books have been discredited pretty unanimously just based on awful research and many known factual errors. So it's kind of hard to take anything else that they've said in these to be true. And this is Disney's World and Walt Disney Hollywood's Dark Prince. Both of these make some references to the fact that Disney was at least interested in cryogenics. And I think one of them even makes the statement that he had contacted someone at these companies about the possibility of being frozen. But regardless, this is pretty clearly a myth that has survived well past the amount of time that it should.
And like you said, I feel like this is the one that everyone's heard.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if it's not pertaining to Disneyland, like, the fact that people still think that he was frozen is wild.
Mm-hmm.
So do we want to move on to the next one?
Sure.
Okay, so this one I also feel like is pretty popular, and this is my first one on here. When you see Toy Story characters and you yell, "Andy's coming," they're supposed to drop to the ground. I don't know how this is still circulating around for similar reasons to what we put with the other ones. The reality of this is that the costumes are far too expensive, first of all. Like, no one's gonna risk damaging that much Disney property, as can be said for the friends of those characters as well. I don't know if anyone's ever tried this and had success with it, but I always feel like I see this one in like the same kind of format as the Crane Spire thing.
Yeah, I hope I'm not perpetuating this rumor further by saying this, but I've seen a photo where there's like somebody laying on the ground and like Woody and Jesse laying on the ground.
Yeah, I've seen that one too.
So I don't know if that was like a, I don't know, behind the scenes thing where the cast members thought it would be funny, or if that used to be a thing that they did and they realized like, hey, this is a really bad idea, we need to ban this. But that's, I mean, obviously that's part of the fuel to the fire of this rumor, is that the picture exists, so people see a picture and automatically assume everything's true.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the thing with that is, like, it also probably depends on the, like, cast member that you get with them, or the friend of Woody, Buzz, and Jesse. Like, I think obviously your interactions with characters will differ from, interaction to interaction. And I feel like they probably don't just like drop to the ground if they do that or anything, but I'm sure that someone along the lines has been like, oh, I got to do that, and that's why it's come up, but that's not a thing that they're like written in code to do.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
I've heard that it's against policy in general for the costumes to touch the ground.
Which would make sense.
You know, don't want to get it nasty.
So after that, this one I hadn't heard until we started researching this, and I thought this was kind of cool. But the myth is that when it first opened, the Haunted Mansion was significantly scarier than it is today, and it was toned down after a guest suffered a heart attack on their ride. Fact-checking this one proved to be a little interesting because there haven't been any reported deaths or incidents like that on this attraction, and aside from that, this ride hasn't really changed much from its original iteration, aside from a few additions here and there.
Yeah. I know I've kind of mentioned this book on here before, but I think it's a really good book for people that are fans of the Haunted Mansion, and it's called The Haunted Mansion: Imagineering a Disney Classic, and they touch on this a little bit in there. Obviously, that this is a myth, but one of the big things that kind of stemmed this rumor, I guess, was that in the initial stages of development for the Haunted Mansion, two of the main Imagineers that were working on this, Mark Davis and Claude Coates, kind of butted heads on what they wanted to do with the design, and Claude Coates pushed very, very hard to have the Haunted Mansion be actually very scary, and had developed a lot of like scenes and stuff in it to be very scary. So that's kind of, I think, where a lot of this myth stemmed from. But anybody that's interested in that kind of stuff or more on the Haunted Mansion, I would recommend checking out that book.
I'm going to have to look into that. So this next one, did we want to talk about that one? I know that this isn't really a myth per se, and it doesn't really even pertain to Disney World, but I thought it might be fun to talk about.
It's cool. I like this one.
Yeah.
Okay, so the myth behind this one, and this one's actually pretty easy to look into, is that there is a basketball net inside of the Matterhorn in Disneyland. And this one's actually true, and it's kind of interesting that we're bringing this up with like our myths and stuff, but if I remember correctly, and I'm sure that both of you don't know this because you don't take planes in, but if you ride the Magical Express from the airport, there's actually, or used to be, a section about the basketball net in the Matterhorn on the video that they played, which is weird because you're going into Disney World, not Disneyland, but that's beside the point.
It's still interesting. Now, the myth that I heard that was at first people were saying that there was like a full-size like hardwood basketball court in the Matterhorn, and when you see the picture, it's like, oh, that's not what that is at all.
Well, and if I remember correctly, there's like a story behind it too, but I can't remember exactly what it is. If you give me like a second, I'll look it up. But it's definitely like just a little single basketball net.
Yeah, it's like the little roll-away ones that you fill the base with water to keep from tipping over.
That kids play on the neighborhood street with.
Exactly.
So we want to.
Yeah, there's too much to read about that, so I'm gonna not look into that. But we can go to the next one, which is also pretty interesting. This rumor is that the airplane on the Great Movie Ride, rest in peace, is the same airplane that was used during the filming of Casablanca, which I feel like is probably something that was said on the Great Movie Ride.
I feel like I've heard it said by a cast member on the Great Movie Ride.
Yeah, so it's one of those things that, like, I feel like it's very easy to take that literally, but the reality of this one is that it is not the actual plane. Apparently, when they were searching for a plane for this attraction, they looked at the original one, but it was significantly smaller than what they were looking for. So it's definitely not what they wanted because it wasn't the right size. But Beth added this in here, and this is a fun fact. The other half of the plane is in the Jungle Cruise. So, that was interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a fun little fact, even if it's not the plane from Casablanca.
I know. I love that. The big question is, now what are they going to do with the front half of the plane?
Yeah, I don't know. It's got to stay somewhere. But, my guess would have been that they would have put it on the backlot tour, but rest in peace to that, too.
Rest in peace.
If they were resourceful enough to say, hey, let's chop this plane in half so we don't have to buy two, I feel like they still want to do something with the other half.
Yeah. They're just waiting for the opportunity. All right, so our next myth is actually, shamefully, one that I have myself perpetuated because it made sense. So I went with it, and I had heard it a million times. I didn't do my research, but now I know better. So the myth is that Disney can claim that no one has ever died at one of their theme parks because they always make sure that the person is off park property before they are declared dead. So there are at least 2 separate instances that via newspaper articles have said such and such was declared dead at the scene and it was on Disney property. So it's a very false rumor. It's hard to believe that people can and do die at the happiest and the most magical places on Earth. But unfortunately, is true that they can.
I don't want to dive too much into the details of some of this stuff, but there have been some very scary incidents at Disney parks that have been reported. There's an article from, I want to say it was 92 or 93, where a man went into the park, or went into Epcot after hours and fired off a shotgun. Mm-hmm. So there are some very scary incidents of death and or injury in the parks. But like I said, I don't want to go too much into that because that's very off topic and all that fun jazz.
Yeah.
That's an episode for our dark podcast. It doesn't exist. Don't go looking for it.
Please don't. What were you saying, Brian?
Well, I was just going to say, you can kind of understand where this myth would have gained traction. Obviously with something, very negative like this, Disney would want to sweep it under the rug, but going as far to move a body off of property before it was declared dead, I have to feel like that's illegal. I don't know that much about law, but that doesn't sound like something that you could legally do in the first place.
Yeah, I do know that there is some law. I'm not sure regarding the exact situation, but there is a law that says that EMTs are supposed to perform CPR until the person is taken to an actual medical facility.
Mm-hmm.
So that they can't actually be declared dead until they are taken there, because the medic has to keep performing CPR, which is kind of crazy, but I think that's probably part of the reason that this rumor got as much steam as it did.
Yeah, I can understand this, and it's probably also one of those things where it's a parent said that to a child to, make them feel better about something, and that's where it gained its footing. But
to make everyone feel better, death on Disney property is extremely rare, especially if you compare it to the percentage of deaths to how many people visit the parks every year. It's you have a better chance of pretty much of getting struck by lightning or getting in a, I don't know, freak accident than you do at dying at Disney World.
Or for an even more direct comparison, must we bring up Action Park again?
There you go.
Oh boy.
Man.
So we have a lot of time left after this one. Are there anything on here that like you guys didn't research, but like can think of off the top of your head, or stuff that you've heard in the parks that may be interesting?
Well, while I was doing research for this, I was reading a lot that I had never even heard of, and many of them I was just like, why would anyone even believe this for a second? Or better yet, even if they did, even if it was true, why does anyone care? So like one of the ones that I was reading is that the rumor or myth is that Walt Disney was born out of wedlock in Spain. And I'm like, why does that matter? Like, who cares,
Right.
So, and then like another weird one was that he left money in his will for the future to give to the first man who managed to get pregnant.
Oh, I saw that one too. That's a little weird.
And I'm like, I think that, yeah, it's just like, that's so bizarre. Like, who came up with these and why?
I guess the one that I hear occasionally in the park is people saying that, if you spend X amount of money, you can stay in the suite in Cinderella Castle.
Yeah, that's a good one. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
Either. Yeah, unfortunately, not that I'd be able to afford it anyway, but...
Well, see, I feel like that one probably popped up around the time that they were giving away stuff like that.
Yeah, for the Year of a Million Dreams.
Yeah, and like, that was cool. It was cool that they were doing that, but it's one of those things where it's like, you gotta realize that at some point, that's just a rumor.
Mm-hmm.
Because could you imagine how much they would charge for that?
Yeah, I can't... It's like if they're charging $2,000 a night for those bungalows at the Polynesian, like, I don't even know how much, like, they would be able to get away with charging for that. Pretty much any price they put on it, someone would pay it.
I seriously think, like, that they could, no joke, charge $50,000 a night, and I bet they would be able to fill that up every night.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody, some rich person that's a huge Disney fan would, I feel like, yeah, they would be able to make money off of that easily.
Yeah, hopefully they don't listen to this podcast and get that idea. Although I'm sure somebody at the company has thought about it.
Like in 2 months it's gonna go up that they're selling it for. That would be funny.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think Bob Iger listens to this podcast, actually. So
He probably does.
takes notes while he's listening.
We're a pretty big
sometimes,
deal.
Sometimes I wonder if they have like someone in Disney's like corporate office that goes on social media and like looks at things. Because sometimes, like, I swear, sometimes I see something pop up on social media or, like, in a podcast, and then all of a sudden it's there, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's a little weird.
Well,
Yeah.
surely they do. I mean, just last week we were talking about the purple wall merchandise, I feel like that's definitely some social media specialist that they have at Disney, looking up that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure they have some sort of, like, marketing team that has a bunch of interns that their sole purpose is to go on social media of popular Disney related blogs and YouTube channels and podcasts and whatever. It's a pretty fun job though. I'd take it.
Heck yeah. All right, so to kind of tie this week up, we got a couple emails, and we promised that when we get emails, we are going to read them on the show. We're going to talk about what you guys want to talk about. So we're going to take a moment to do some like correspondence here, which will be fun. A couple weeks ago, we had a listener reach out to us about date ideas. They reached back out to us, and they said some nice words. So kind of wanted to read them because it's always fun to have someone say something nice about something that you're doing. So we will go through that one. Their last chunk of their email basically said that they found us on Spotify while they were cleaning the house, and the Abandoned Disney came up as a suggestion. They listened to the same topic from a bunch of different creators that weren't very good, and they thought ours was well researched. They really enjoyed learning about the ferry boat to Magic Kingdom from Fort Wilderness that takes you past both sites, and then she went through and listened to some of our archive. She particularly liked the accessibility at Disney one, which is awesome. Shout out to Chant again for helping us with that one.
Mm-hmm.
And they've seen stuff about Give Kids the World, and they, want to learn more about that. They also enjoyed my pin troller tip, and to go a little bit back up, they really liked Brian's putt-putt suggestion, so pat on the back to that one, Brian.
And if you are listening again today, there are actually 2 on-property putt-putt courses, and I would recommend both of them.
Have you done both of them? I mean, I'm sure you have. You just said that you
I have multiple times.
Which one do you like better? Do you have a preference?
I like Winter Summerland probably the best, but that's also because I like Blizzard Beach a lot, and I love that theming. I think it's the Christmas / water park theming is just really funny. But Fantasia Gardens is also good. I'm wanting to say that each of them has 2 courses that you can play through, and I think one of them at Fantasia Gardens is more of a kind of realistic, more putt-putt type deal, if you can call that realistic, but it doesn't have a lot of the whimsical little obstacles you're trying to shoot around. It's just like a miniature golf course, and then the other side is more of that, and then both of them at Winter Summerland are very classic putt-putt style obstacles, but nice. They're both a lot of fun. I do recommend it for a date, or even it's fun to go as a big family or a group of friends or whatever. I just really like putt-putt, so putt-putt at Disney is just doubly awesome for me.
I feel like I'm going to have to try that. Weirdly enough, I've done mini golf at Universal, but not Disney.
Huh.
So that's very weird for me.
Is it that thing that you walk by when you're going towards City Walk?
Yeah, it's right under the bridge when you go into City Walk.
It's got the Monster House or something?
Yeah, and it was cool.
I
mean, it wasn't... I feel like Disney's is probably significantly better, but I'm also a little biased. But that's definitely on my list now. Since you mentioned that, I've been I really should look into that.
It's a lot of fun.
So this next one is from a new listener, April S. She said she loves listening to the podcast. She's been doing so for a couple weeks on her way back to work each morning, and she's not looking forward to when she's finally caught up and will have to wait each week for a new episode. So she wants to contribute some content ideas for us to expand on, which is awesome. We love that suggestion because we sometimes get a little bit writer's block, I guess, or podcaster's block, I guess, is what you could really call it.
Last week's episode.
Yeah,
we just had to freestyle it a little bit.
But I want to reiterate again, if you guys ever have suggestions for us, if you ever want to hear us talk about something, or there's something that you're curious about, send it to us, because we have a document of stuff that we want to talk about, and we'll probably be likely to put things to the top priority that people want to hear about.
Mm-hmm.
But her suggestions were, she just found out about the birthday cake hotline, which I actually had never heard of, where you can call in and make a reservation to have a birthday cake to be any part of any dining reservation if you're celebrating a birthday. Maybe we can elaborate on this one. She was wondering if anyone has, or if you could do it for any occasions as well. We brought this up in our group chat. Kirsten had, so I think we might wait on that one until she can come back on the show. And I can do a little bit of research, because I actually didn't know about this until it was brought up to us. The other one that we got was Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom card game. Just started collecting these every time I go to the park. They're so pretty. We've actually gotten this one twice now, I want to say. And I don't think any of us really collect Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom. I could be wrong. But I'm open to doing some research on it. I've played the game a couple times, so I have that little bit of knowledge. But got to do a little bit more research on that. And then she said that she hasn't heard us mention the submarine voyage at Magic Kingdom, and she wants to know if anyone of us has ridden it. It was incredible. we can talk about that one a little bit because I feel like that's not going to take up a lot of time. I haven't. I don't know if you guys have.
I have a really sad story.
Oh no.
So the first time I went to Disney, it's one of 2 times that I ever went to Disney as a child. Every other time I've been an adult. So the first time I was like 6 years old, and I like refused to ride this because the idea of being underwater terrified me. Like being in a submarine, even though, you know, it's kind of I mean, I guess you go a little bit under, but it's like an illusion mostly. But I refused to ride it, and now I'll never get to. So that's my sad story.
Yeah, I was 2 when it closed. I might have gone on it as a little baby. I know my parents took me when I was that young, but I clearly don't remember it. I have watched ride-through videos, and I wish so much that this ride was still around. The whole concept of it just looks so cool to me. And, you know, to think that if it was still around today with some modern updates, like what it could be. And it does make me sad that this isn't there anymore.
Now, they do have the Finding Nemo submarine voyage at Disneyland, if I'm not mistaken. So you can still kind of experience the general idea of the ride.
Now, does that use the same, like, track system and everything as the original?
I'm pretty sure.
Huh.
I'd have to, you know, dig in and look up a little bit more information, but I'm pretty sure it is essentially the same ride, and I think it was even the same theme, and then they just rethemed it to Finding Nemo. But I take it with a grain of salt. I could be totally wrong.
Okay, wow. Well, that's cool if it is. I didn't know that.
It kind of sounded like, from what I'm looking at, it kind of sounds like that's the case.
Interesting.
So have to go ride that one before it closes. I heard one of the reasons it closed was because it was so expensive to upkeep.
I heard there were a lot of minor issues with it, like leaking and the AC systems inside not working.
Plus, didn't you like literally have to walk down into it?
I think so.
So that was like, you know, a nightmare for loading times, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Well, we should do an episode after one of us goes to Disneyland about like all the different attractions that they have there that we don't have in Walt Disney World, and we can cover the Finding Nemo one if it's still there.
We should also do one on long lost attractions.
That would be a good one.
Yeah, that would be fun. We can definitely do that. Actually, I think I would really like to do that one because we can talk about like all the different ones that are not around anymore that we didn't get to experience, and there's a couple of them that I really wish that I was around for. Like Horizons. Horizons is one that I hear a lot of good things about.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Like, just as cool as watching the ride-through videos of it are, I can't imagine how cool it would have been to ride the actual ride.
Yeah. So that said, is there anything you guys want to talk about before we wrap this up? Because I am out of stuff to talk about.
No? I mean...
Then that's going to do it for us this week. Thanks for joining us again on another episode of the Station 71 podcast. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes. Leave us an iTunes review as well. We can address your questions, comments, concerns on next week's episode. If you want to get in touch with us, be sure to find us on facebook.com/Station71pod. We're on Twitter at Station71pod, Instagram at Station71podcast, and you can send us listener emails to Station71podcast@gmail.com. Thanks for joining us again. We hope you enjoyed your ride, and we'll see you real soon.